What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to my retrospective review of Breaking Bad, a series that ran from 2008 to 2013, a very popular show that played on AMC. I remember watching it back in the day, a little bit over 10 years ago. I watched it after it had already completed. It was on Netflix at a certain point. It was one of those shows I was behind on, and over the course of the last few months, I rewatched it with my wife. She had never seen the show before, so I thought it was a perfect opportunity not only to rewatch it myself and to show it to her, but also to be able to do a video. There's also a follow-up sequel film called El Camino that I actually had never seen up to a couple of days ago, so I will be having a review for that as well very soon on the channel. And there is a spin-off series, a prequel known as Better Call Saul, which I've actually never seen a single episode of. I've heard it's amazing. I've always meant to get around to it, but I'm super late to the game. And so as I was rewatching Breaking Bad, I figured this would be a great time to do a retrospective review for the series while also doing a review for El Camino and eventually getting around to catching all of Better Call Saul and doing a retrospective for that as well. And Breaking Bad is one of those shows that's like, what can I really add to the discussion? It comes from the mind of Vince Gilligan, who is the main writer and showrunner of the show, and he directed plenty of episodes as well alongside many other people in this series. And this show has tons of people who have directed episodes and been a part of the production of this show in terms of producing it behind the scenes. Bryan Cranston, one of the main stars of the show, or the main star of the show, is one of those people who did a lot of the behind the scenes work of the show as time went on. And even directors like Rian Johnson directed episodes of this show. And I think it goes without saying that Breaking Bad is one of the most celebrated television dramas of all time. So going back and revisiting it was a blast. I loved the show the first time I saw it, and I loved it even more so the second time, being able to watch my wife's reaction to the moments that I already knew were coming. And it's one of those shows also that you really got to be in the mood to watch. It's very serious, it's very drama heavy. While it does have some great moments of levity and there's some great moments that will make you laugh at times, it is one of those shows that's very heavy a lot of times, has some pretty serious scenes, has very high tension sequences, but is without a doubt one of the best written shows, I think, when it comes down to a televised drama. What Vince Gilligan was able to do when it comes down to character work and just tension building sequences and seasons that continue to build upon one another and consistently add a layer of dread to all of the events that are unfolding, it's just top tier. What Vince Gilligan was able to do, it just completely blows my mind, and this show will forever be one of the greatest dramas I think that's ever been made. So yeah, this is going to be a very open review, just kind of talking about the show and my experience with it and talking about some characters. I will be touching on some spoilers from time to time, but this won't be a full spoiler review of everything that's happened in the show. We'd be here all day, and I don't have all that time. I just wanted to sit here and kind of celebrate the show and talk about the characters and some of the things that I really loved about the show. And let's get a little bit of a reminder of what the show is all about for anybody who's not super aware. The show opens up and we're introduced to Walter White, played by Bryan Cranston, who is a science teacher and an all-around good guy. He works at a car wash, and he's just kind of, you know, being a good dad, being a good husband, going and just being the goody two-shoes guy. That's pretty much who he is. He is a safe goody two-shoes guy. And unfortunately, he ends up finding out he has cancer, and he's going to be passing away fairly soon. This, of course, puts the fear of God in him, and he doesn't necessarily have much to leave his family. He fears that he's going to possibly leave his family with no money and kind of be in a tight spot. This is when he is reintroduced to an old student of his, played by Aaron Paul, the character of Jesse Pinkman. And Jesse Pinkman is, you know, got some issues with the law at times. He does drugs, he's a drinker, he wants to party all the time. He's super immature and, you know, sells drugs on the side as well. And the two end up teaming up to make meth on the side secretly. And because of the fact that Walter White is this goody two-shoes guy, of course, he's absolutely fearful of getting into this world. But because he's a big science guy, he is a science teacher and a chemist, he's able to create top-of-the-line meth that ends up becoming the most highly demanded meth in the entirety of the New Mexico area that he's in. And of course, it has its distinct blue color that gives it its own identity. And over the course of the show, he would end up taking on the alias of Heisenberg and would become a absolute top-tier target for not only the police, but also for other top-tier competition in the world of drug dealing. And he will consistently find himself in more and more trouble as time goes on. And as the title title of the show suggests, over the course of the show, he starts to break bad. You have this goody two-shoes teacher who's doing this solely for his family so that he can leave him some money, eventually letting the world of drug dealing and being part of the crime world corrupt him more and more and more until he becomes the ultimate villain of the show, with the character of Jesse Pinkman initially being, this punk kid who wants to make some money and is willing to do everything and anything to make some money with this guy and do this shady underground work, eventually realizing that Walter White is becoming the ultimate villain, and he himself kind of becomes a victim to this world that he was so privy to for a long time. And so that's the general gist of the show, and there's a bunch of characters in the mix. Walter White's family, who of course find themselves in the crosshairs of so many situations, whether it be with other drug dealers, criminals, the police themselves. There's so many different elements to this show that add so many layers of drama and tension and fear for our characters. It's just top tier writing all around. You have a great musical score that's super subtle over the course of the show, but very impactful. And the show is also fairly quiet a lot of times too. There isn't this overly abundant sense of music. It's used very subtly throughout the course of the show. There's a great musical intro theme as well, but the show is able to kind of just be quiet and let the dialogue really run the show. While there are great moments with action and some great moments that, have high stakes in terms of somebody's gonna die in this moment, a lot of this show is high stakes, high tension, simply through dialogue and through dramatic sequences between characters. And this has to be some of the greatest writing. I know I've already kind of said that, but Vince Gilligan, what he was able to do with these characters over the course of the show is just phenomenal on the page. The writing for these characters is phenomenal. You add on top of that fantastic actors who understood the assignment, and what you have here is just a show that completely glues you to the screen from beginning to end. Now, this is a show that can be considered slow by many, and I would agree there are certain episodes that are fairly slow, and there are elements about this show that are slow, but this is not a show that's about fast-paced, over-the-top action and craziness all the time. It builds to those moments and allows moments and sequences to really build upon themselves in a way where you find yourself like, okay, where's this gonna go? And eventually you're literally like, holy shit, I can't believe that just happened. Episodes will completely have you speechless by the time it comes to the end and the credits are rolling, where you're just staring at the screen like, I have to watch the next episode. I have to see what happens. Or you'll find yourself in sequences where you literally didn't even realize that you were holding your breath. The episode ends and you're like, man, that was tense. And a lot of that, again, just really has to come down to that beautiful writing that is so well done. And when it comes down to those performers, they all really elevate the material. And man, Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul, the two lead stars of the show, they are phenomenal. They absolutely carry this show, and the rest of their co-stars in this show absolutely carry the show alongside them. Outside of all of those elements, and we're going to get into all of the various cast members in a second, or at least some of the main ones I want to talk about. You have great cinematography here. Again, the sound design is great. The musical score that's subtly used is really great. The locations that are used as well. All the makeup that's used for blood throughout the course of the show. The various weapons that they use. There's a sense of authenticity when you watch this show across the board. The vehicles that are used. Just the overall vibe and look of the show is so well done. There's also a bunch of time-lapse sequences throughout the course of the show that definitely give this show its own identity stylistically. And as somebody who has driven through a big chunk of New Mexico, I think this was the perfect place to set a show like this, because New Mexico is just vast nothingness in a lot of it, a lot of open desert. And I drove through there with my wife years ago as we were moving from Nevada to Florida, and it was just a whole lot of nothing. And you'd come into a town and say there's a town coming up, and there'd literally be 2 houses, maybe a corner store, and then you'd leave that town. I remember there was a run where we were struggling on gas and we were absolutely starving, and it took us forever to finally find a small town that had food and gas. It was absolutely insane how vastly just empty that area is. I mean, it must be where they film a lot of westerns, because it seems like the perfect location to do that, because it looks like a desolate land. It looks like something like Tatooine in certain areas. And so watching this show, I think it was just the perfect place to set it. While this does take place in more populated areas of New Mexico, the way that they're able to kind of showcase these just open, desolate locations and use those places. So much of this is all practically shot. This isn't a show that requires, green screen and different things like that. And so they're able to make this world feel tangible, feel real, while also making it feel otherworldly. Because if you live here in the States, a lot of places here in the States are fairly populated. There are certain states and certain cities and towns within those states that don't have much, but New Mexico is a very unique state in the United States that really does have a whole lot of nothing for big chunks of it. So to set the show here, I thought was super solid and allowed for a lot of the story to be told in a very interesting way, where our characters are able to get away with certain things or hide things out in the desert. And it kind of just opens this show up to allow you to have a lot of situations too where two characters are out in the desert alone, and it's not about the too much going on. It's really about the small character moments that are able to just kind of be in very secluded locations. I hope all of that made sense. I'm realizing now that I'm just kind of rambling, but this is a show I think is able to capture so much, not only when it comes down to his performances and its writing, not only when it comes down to the sound design and those technical aspects, but also the locations that were used and all of those other elements of the technical aspects really help to amplify the storytelling here. And I really think that Vince Gilligan's viewpoint of what he wanted this show to be is damn near perfect. This is a show I would say is damn near perfect. Its utilization of characters, its utilization of dialogue, its utilization of small moments that are referenced episodes or seasons later in such a great way that will have you go, oh my God, I cannot believe they just tied into that, or oh my God, I had forgotten that character had that, and now this other character is about to get caught by the police, or another character caught them having it, or they hid it and now it's kind of reappeared. Like, the show is able to utilize so much that it sets up for later on, and never really feels like there's something that's left on the table. There doesn't really feel like there's something where you're like, I wish they would have gotten back to this, or I feel like they kind of just threw that character in and completely underutilized them. Like, Vince Gilligan had a vision alongside the rest of the writers and directors here to really give this show weight and to make every little moment really count. There isn't really a lot of moments or sequences or dialogue that happens in this show that isn't in some way paid off, and I think that's a marvel in the world of movies and TV shows that a lot of times make us go like, oh yeah, I wish that this show had kind of tackled that a little bit more. Oh, that character felt underdeveloped. Breaking Bad doesn't have that. I truly feel they do an incredible job with the characters and the story across the board. So, of course, that's my review of the show. But let's talk about the various characters in the show. Of course, I've already talked a little bit about them, but got to talk again about Bryan Cranston as Walter White. I mean, his performance here is so great. He's able to play such a charming and likable character at first, and as he breaks bad over the course of the show, I mean, he does such an incredible job of being this vicious asshole, this guy who started off so precious, and the way he's able to still maintain that, the lies that he's able to sell throughout the course of the show, Bryan Cranston's ability to switch on a dime from a dangerous man to this sweet, lovable, hey, everything's okay, there's no real big problems. Let me explain to you what happened. I don't even know how it happened. No, I made a mistake here. Gosh darn it, look at me, what a silly klutz. And then the next scene, he's just back to absolutely vicious. And I think that, Bryan Cranston just killed it in the show. It's got to be my favorite performance from him in anything. And, honestly, I wish we saw him in a lot more, but I mean, what he does in this show alone makes his entire career worth it just for this performance. And his co-star, Aaron Paul. I mean, Aaron Paul is one of those actors I feel like I don't see enough. I've seen him in plenty. I've seen him in things here and there, but he is phenomenal in this show as Jesse Pinkman. As I mentioned before, he starts off as like this punk-like character. He's not somebody who's like overly likable. He loves to say bitch, loves to call people a bitch for everything. I think he's so funny in parts of the show, but he's a very immature character for majority of the runtime, and the hardships that he kind of faces with this world that he was excited to be a part of. He was hyped about the fact that he's got this, old science teacher who's like this badass chemist and is able to make this top of the line meth. He's so excited about the money they're making initially. And as the show progresses, the way that the danger of this world affects him and those he loves, it's just heartbreaking. Some of the love interest he has over the course of the show, some of the elements about himself where he just starts to realize that this isn't what he wants. And even when he tries to escape the world multiple times, the person he brought into it, Walter White, keeps him imprisoned in a lot of ways there, and eventually finds himself imprisoned at the end of the show, and it just leads to him being one of the most heartbreaking characters in the show. And Aaron Paul just really captures this character beautifully. I mean, he's able to capture so much just depth with this character alongside moments of levity that I just think it's just got to be one of my favorite performances in a show of all time. I think both him and Bryan Cranston absolutely understood the assignment of the show, and I don't think I could ever imagine anybody else playing these characters. So let's move on to some of the other side characters now, and then we'll wrap this video up. I'm sorry this is running a little bit long, but if you're watching this and you're enjoying it, I hope you guys definitely let me know down below how you feel about Breaking Bad and the various characters. Who's your favorite character? Who's your least favorite character? Whatever the case may be. Skyler, of course, Skyler White, played by Anna Gunn, is the wife of Walter White, and she is like a stickler. She's super frustrating for a big chunk of the show. She is a character that I feel is so necessary because here she is, the wife. She complicates so much because she is so by the book, so by the rule, and she's a character that can easily be seen as a bitch for a big chunk of the show. But you do feel for her as time goes on because she is also a victim to Walter White's choices in so many moments. And she's a character who you might kind of shrug your shoulders off, like, oh, what's the big deal? He's just trying to sell some drugs on the side to make some money for the family. Eventually, when his family is really put into danger and she finds herself complicit to this entire activity, I think that she's able to really capture so much of the weight of all this. And again, she's a character you will find yourself hating for chunks of time, but a character that is so integral to the drama and the complication of the narrative here. And I think that she does an incredible job as an actress. I mean, I think the show is meant to have you be frustrated with her for big tons of time, and the actress does an incredible job here. Then you have her sister, played by Betsy Brandt, the character of Marie, who is, of course, the sister-in-law to Walter White. She loves purple. That's one thing to say. I've never seen a character be so obsessed with purple. I mean, her and Hank's home, and we're going to talk about Hank in a second, just so covered in purple. It's absolutely insane. But yeah, she also, similar to Skyler, is able to add this level of complication because of her goody two-shoe nature. And you also find her to be kind of a victim to a lot of the situations that are happening here too. I think that she does a great job of playing this very frustrating character at times that adds to a lot of these moments of tension. Even though she can be a little bit more frustrating, I would say, than Skyler at times. But her other half is honestly the most interesting character in the mix, which is the character of Hank Schrader, played by Dean Norris, and he's fantastic. He works as a police officer, specifically in the drug unit, and he is literally looking for Heisenberg. He's looking for the person who is behind this blue meth, not knowing for majority of the show that it is his brother-in-law. And that adds to so much tension. The amount of times that he almost finds out who Walter is, who Heisenberg is so good. This show is able to keep you on your toes with him as a character. He's frustrating where he feels like a villain at times, but also feels like a victim and feels like the hero in other moments. The fact that you follow this lead character that does go from the sweetest guy that you don't want to see get caught to this a-hole that you just can't side with anymore by the time the credits are rolling on the final season. Hank is also a very interesting character in the mix too, because he's just trying to be a good cop. He wants to get these drugs off the street, and I think anybody with logical sense would know that's a good thing. But he's played as an asshole. He's played as this frustrating character that you are siding with Walter White for a chunk of the show, but eventually you find yourself siding more and more with Hank as you have Walter kind of leading into the darkness. And so those tense moments between the two characters earlier on the show, long before he even knows who Walter actually is so well done. The way that Walter is able to kind of deceive him, and Dean Norris's performance in all of this, playing this kind of, lovable, fun going, hey, what's the problem? We're having a good time kind of brother-in-law, but also the serious cop. He captures it so well. I think this is his, without a doubt, defining role as an actor. And there are so many great moments in the latter half of the show once he does know who Walter is, that also just really add to a higher level of stakes. And he's a character you feel for as we get to the end of the show, and unfortunately he's killed amidst all of Walter's madness. Then you have RJ Might, or Mitt, I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name, or Matei. He plays the character of Walter White Jr., the son of Skyler and Walter. He later on changes his name to Flynn. It's his chosen name, and he's an interesting character because the actor and the character have cerebral palsy, and he does a really great job of being this like funny, likable young kid who's, pretty naive to things initially, and eventually finds himself like, realizing who his father is eventually, and some of the struggles, and seeing his parents going through divorce. He's kind of left in the dark for a big chunk of it, and the way his character is able to kind of mature while he's left in the dark, he goes from being this naive, sweet kid that his family's all good and dandy, to the point where he's like frustrated to be left in the dark. And all of this that's happening is causing him to mature and kind of lean into a darker path, that kind of mentally towards his family, like before he even understands what's truly going on. And once he does, the way that the character goes from silly and young to like pretty mature and wanting to protect his mom by the end of the show, I think is really well done. And the character, again, is funny at times, and he's super likable and sweet, and there's so many great moments with this character. And without a doubt, one of the highlights of the show. He doesn't have an abundance to do, I would say, in the overall plot. He does kind of feel like just like a complication at times, in the sense that, it's kind of a obstacle for Walter to kind of avoid. He loves his son, and he is a big part of the show for sure. I'm not saying by any means that the character of Walter White Jr. isn't a big part of the show, but just simply that, like, eventually it kind of feels like this obstacle for Walter White of like, I gotta make sure my relationship with my son is good, and also make sure that he doesn't find out what's happening. So he's kind of left in the dark a lot of times, being the naive one in most of these sequences. But again, I think the actor does an incredible job of capturing all of that. And I love that they, leaned into his real disability and allowed him to be a real character. And that's a big thing about the show, is that all of the actors feel real. All of these characters feel like real people. There isn't a thing where it feels like these people are acting. There doesn't feel like people are putting on a performance. And I think a big part of that is the performers. A big part of that is the writing too. When you write natural feeling dialogue that doesn't necessarily feel forced. And I think that, the character of Flynn is one of those perfect examples. And I mentioned before that there is a spin-off series, a prequel show to this, that's called Better Call Saul. And that, of course, is originated here with Better Call Saul being the lawyer, Saul Goodman, played by Bob Odenkirk. And he is absolutely incredible in the show. Like, the fact that he got his own spin-off show makes sense 100%. He is absolutely hilarious throughout the course of the show. He starts off as just kind of this, punk-ass lawyer that's, good with getting criminals out of problems. He's willing to kind of do the shady, dirty work on the side. By no means is he like a top of the line lawyer, but he has his connections to kind of get people in and out of situations. He's not really stressed about living in the world of grime and crime. And I think that Bob Odenkirk just captures a great sense of levity with his character, while also kind of finding himself being a very serious character as time goes on. And even in the most serious moments, the lines of humor that he's able to capture without ever feeling goofy, I think is incredible. And it totally makes sense that he got his own show. And I look forward to watching that. I've heard he's phenomenal, and I've heard many times that he was absolutely snubbed for not being nominated for an Emmy because of his performance. So I'm really excited to go ahead and check out Better Call Saul. Love him in the show. And of course, you got to talk about Jonathan Banks as Mike Ehrmantraut. He is a character that Walter and Jesse find themselves kind of mixed into business with later on, once they start working with another character we're going to talk about in just a moment, called Gus Fring. And yeah, I thought he was absolutely incredible in the show. Jonathan Banks is able to bring, again, great moments of levity, but he's a very serious character, and he's a very dangerous character too. And for an old man, sometimes older actors sometimes try to play cool or dangerous, and it doesn't really come off that way. But he's a character that you're able to really feel for over the course of the show, because he is a threat. You do feel fearful for our characters when he's involved, or for other people. He doesn't really have much of a moral compass. He does, he'll work with you, but he's there to do a job. He's very, business first. So if he's going to kill somebody, or he's there to protect somebody, or he's there to, kind of take care of business, he's going to deal with that business before he puts any sort of moral code in front of him. And I think that Jonathan Banks is able to capture this great sense of gravitas and seriousness with this character, which oftentimes leads to great moments of humor, very dry wit that I really thoroughly enjoyed throughout the course of the show. And he's definitely one of those characters you find yourself emotionally tied to as time goes on, and you learn about his granddaughter and kind of what he's fighting for on the side, and what he needs to keep secret, and what he's working for. I think that he becomes a really likable and enjoyable character, and always heartbroken about the way his character is killed off in the show too. I feel like he's just, without a doubt, one of the biggest standouts of this show. But speaking about one of the biggest standouts of the show, Giancarlo Esposito, Gus Fring, he is, of course, really tied in with, he's like the biggest name in like selling drugs in the area. Of course, he works at El Pollo Loco, which is the like local chicken establishment that's there, like a fast food establishment. He's a manager there. That is his alias. And yeah, we end up learning he's the most dangerous man pretty much that you can get involved with in the world of drugs. And, initially it seems like a great business opportunity for Walter White and Jesse, only for them to learn that they may have gotten involved with the devil pretty much. They made a deal with the devil, and the amount of danger that Giancarlo Esposito is able to impose in these sequences with him. The amount of time that's spent with Gus Fring in this show is got to be some of my favorite parts of this entire show. Giancarlo Esposito is phenomenal in this show. He's able to really make you feel afraid of this character. He's able to play incredibly psychotic while also incredibly restrained, while also playing incredibly composed. The way that he's able to kind of play this character. And then there's these small moments, you know, there's that great scene where he's tapping his fingers in the elevator, where he just feels like he's really holding back a crazy personality. The way that he's able to capture that and showcase this character that you don't know how to feel about, it feels very similar about like the Joker. While the Joker's a little bit more on the nose at times, he will be more crazy flat out and kind of let it out. There is that element of like, you don't know what's going to happen with this character in that scene. And when you're watching this show for the first time and being able to watch my wife's reactions, he makes you feel a sense of like not knowing what he's going to do in a scene. He may kill somebody, he may not kill somebody, he may beat them to a pulp, or he may just smile at them and make them feel afraid. And you as an audience member are just so impressed. And just that entire segment that has to do with Gus Fring in this show is just so good. Love him in this show. And anytime I rewatch this show in the future, I'm going to be looking forward to when Gus Fring is introduced into the show again. Another actor who appeared in this show who's really blown up since this show is the actor Jesse Plemons, playing the character of Todd, who was involved with some, you know, drug dealers and kind of like a shady group of guys that Jesse and Walter find themselves involved with in the last couple of seasons, or specifically the last season of the show. And Todd and his people end up kind of, you know, imprisoning Jesse for the later part of the show, which is heartbreaking. And he plays this like kind of like very simple-minded, kind of interesting individual who's like, you don't really know how he's going to react. He seems like just like a nice fellow, but he's dangerous because he just kind of will make decisions on a dime, like killing the young kid that they kill, you know, at a certain point in one of the jobs that they're doing. And just, he tries to be this like nice, likable, hey, you know, do you want to hang out kind of guy, but at the same time he's very dangerous and like very trigger happy, and I think he's able to capture that very, very well here. We're going to be talking about him again when we talk about El Camino, the movie that takes place after this. I have some thoughts on his involvement in that movie, but yeah, I thought that he was great in the show, and definitely somebody that's worth mentioning here in this video. And outside of them, there's tons of other great names that are in this show. It would take me forever to talk about everybody in this show, but you have people like Kristen Ritter, who plays the character of Jane, who's like a love interest, an unfortunate passing love interest of Jesse Pinkman at a certain point of the show, but also great big names in here like Bill Burr or Danny Trejo, Mark Margolis. There's so many great names in this show that it would take me forever to go through everybody and all the characters, but it goes without saying that I think Breaking Bad is a phenomenal show. I had a great time going back and revisiting it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have seen Breaking Bad in the past and maybe you just haven't seen something on it in a while, I hope I was able to take you down memory lane. And if you're a fan of the show, definitely let me know down below. Maybe you're not even a fan. Did you like this show? Did you not like this show? Who's your favorite characters or favorite season you have? Whatever the case may be, let me know down below. And yeah, we'll have reviews soon on the channel for El Camino, the sequel film to this show, as well as at some point I do plan on doing Better Call Saul as well. So definitely let me know your thoughts on Breaking Bad down below, and thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it all. Bye-bye.